to see people. I hated being trapped at home, sitting on a webinar, and you talk to everybody, and then what I love is talking to everybody afterwards and finding out what you think. And there was no one there but my 2 dogs. I only had 1 dog last time I was here. I have 2 now, so that's very exciting. It is really nice to see everybody. I've always enjoyed coming to these events, and we think we've been doing this for a decade now.
We do.
We're still talking to each other, so that's kind of quite good, isn't it? So I'm going to talk a little about the property market, and I tend to do PPE, which is, in my world, politics, property and economics. It was a very odd moment once when I actually presented that, forgetting that I was actually at Oxford University, and people were looking at me very oddly, but it seems to have worked anyway. So there's a lot to get through because I haven't seen you for so long. So I'm going to talk to you about the pandemic years and what's happened, because it feels sort of weird that those are maybe over, hopefully. I'm also going to talk to you about the politics because, boy, you know, anybody remember a chap called George Osborne? Yes, and the devastation, and you remember we all told him what an idiot he was? Well, now it's come to fruition, so we'll chat about that and what might happen next. How 2023 is shaping up so far, because we're at a stage at the moment whereby whenever the market goes up or whenever the market goes down, which it takes about 6 months to a year to do either of those things, all the indices talk a pile of rubbish. But we still only have a media that report on what the indices are saying. So it is utter rubbish. So I'll explain to you what's happening. And I will talk you through forecasts, which I'm sure you'll be delighted about, because I think the forecasts that we've had since Brexit have failed miserably. But hey, it's good for a laugh, isn't it? And we'll chat about that a little bit more. Some things for you guys to consider. So this is my favourite data. It's land registry data. This is government data that we have. All this tells you is what has actually happened. It's of no use to you if you want to know what's happening now, but it's good kind of historic stuff, and I'll walk you through it. So I've tried to make it as relevant to you guys as possible, because if I just give you some average data which isn't relevant to this area, you'd be very depressed, you'd have all walked out, and you'd have sold all your properties by now. So the good news is you don't have to do that here, because you have quite a good part of the world. So if I go through England first, if we take January, which is the latest data that we have from the land registry, from that means people making offers in the summer. So this is before the fabulous September government that we had that caused the devastation. So that's the average 310,000. We tend to look at things year on year, and data for me in property is utterly useless unless you want to flip a property or something like that. It's totally useless, and most landlords hold, as people do, for about 20 years. So why we discuss year on year data, I have no idea. And so we look at how property does over time. So we go back to the last height of the market, which would have been 2007. So you can see that prices have gone up by 59%. You'll notice that we're over a decade, and remember, if you go to, I don't know if you've seen all the press about a property education group that's just died. It's the one that, unfortunately, poor Martin Roberts of the auction thing, which is very good. Unfortunately, he was their ambassador. Well, that's just gone under and taken £3 million of people's money. And they're the sort of people probably that go out and say property prices double every 10 years. Well, we haven't seen that since 2005, which is why they take the data back to 2005, because the only way that happens is if you go all the way back to 2007, back to 2000. So a 59% increase, which is a good increase. Year on year, it's 6.9%. That's good. How do you know that year on year 6.9% is good? Well, you look to see how that average works out versus historic years. That's the only way you can look at a year on year, is how does that compare? If it's really rubbish versus previous years, it's a good time to buy, and not the best time to sell potentially. But if it's double, which this almost is, it's a good time, it's a good time for sellers. So in England, you have a 7% increase year on year, and then the annual average increase, which is where I date everything back to, is 2005, because that's just the most sensible point. And one of the reasons is when you look at the average price today versus 2005, it's up 3.8%. Anybody know sort of, I'm just thinking, I haven't put the data on there. What the average increase is inflation since 2005? We'll just shout out some numbers, let's have some fun.
15.
So this is year on year, so this is the average inflation annually back to 2005. If I took it, much better. 4, we've got a 4. It's 3. We're all ingratiated now. We've never had known what inflation was until the last 12 months. So normally it's 3. So that's a nice figure that if you bought property in 2005, on average it's gone up by 3.8%. You want it to be higher than inflation. So that's a good thing. But if you took it and you bought in 2007, which is the last height of the market, so it had a little bit of an uptick for 2 years, it was only 3%. Anybody here own with cash? You don't have to necessarily declare that with your arms up. You can if you wish. Well, that means you wouldn't have earned a penny, because you put 100 grand in and it's gone up in line with inflation over all of those years, which is why you need to be very, very careful with cash investments. It is not necessarily the best way. Good to buy and hold for a short time, not necessarily in the long run. And interestingly, if you take data from the average house price today and you take it back to 2000, fabulous, it's 6.4%, which is why I don't take any data pre-2005, because between 2000 and 2005, every single property price doubled. So if you take data today and you compare it back to 2000, it's nonsense, because it's a historic, this is what happened. It's not going to tell you what the future is. Going back to 2005 is a good balance, because property prices have settled then with all the extra money that poured into the market post the crash of the internet and buy-to-let mortgages coming in and interest-only mortgages coming in. We just had this wallop of cash going in and pushing house prices up. And if I tell you that most regions around the rest of the country have not kept up with inflation, so if you take the average house price today and you go back to 2007, average house prices just to stand still would have had to have gone up by 40%. Every single one of your regions and areas has smashed it. So this, from a capital growth area, is a really, really good place to have your money. So it should be paying back. And if you've got properties out there that are underperforming that and your aim is to have capital growth, you might want to think about whether they're the right ones now for the future. And that's what you want to kind of be assessing. So these stats are only any use when you analyse your own portfolio against them, really. But the good news is this is an exceptional area. It does far better than England, and it is mostly because of Cambridge. So England always does very well because you've got London, and the east of England do very well because you've got Cambridge. Huntingdon and Peterborough do slightly better than England, which is good. I've always been a massive fan of Peterborough just because of that train journey in. It's underpriced in my view. When you look everywhere around it, you look at that commute into London, it has to go that little bit higher at some point. There's a good affordability and it can still improve. So it's always been one of my favourite places outside of London to tell people to invest. And you can see, of course, the huge price differences. So if you want a nice little bit of yield, rents don't tend to vary as much as house prices. So rents in Peterborough probably won't have the distance, if you like, between Cambridge and Peterborough. So if you buy at 250, you'll probably get a better yield as well. So you've got to bear that in mind. So actually, that is super, super good news. Well done, everybody. Happy days. Good place to be. Well done, Maxine. Fantastic area to have opened up an agency in. So we've had a really, really, really weird few years, which is why all the forecasts have been totally and utterly wrong. And let me try and explain that a little bit. My big theory is that this is because the structure of the property market has substantially changed since 2008 and since the 1990s. Most people telling you about the property market, what's going to happen, they are just ingrained in prices going up, doubling every decade since 2000, and they're ingrained in this is what happened in 2007 recession, so if we're going into a recession now, which we don't seem to know, then prices must fall by X amount. I think all of that is just rubbish, and to the point that my fantastic forecast is I don't really quite think we do know where this year is going to end up. I know that's slightly disappointing because I know you want me here, but give me another couple of months and we might make it. But let's get this bit over the way and then I'll come and chat to you at another stage and we'll tell you what's really happened. So, really weird things have happened. 2 weird things have happened. This is Aberdeen. Now, does anybody know Aberdeen? Anybody invested in Aberdeen? Jolly good, because it's really pants at the moment. So Aberdeen was a fantastic market. Didn't bother to have a recession when we all did in 2007. No 20% falls there because oil was just fine. And as long as the oil economy was driving forward, Aberdeen prices and rents were going absolutely nuts. But oil collapsed. And no surprises, because when economies collapse, prices collapse. don't they? We'll come on to that in a little minute. But on this slide, yes, they do. And here's an interesting thing, and I'll talk about this a little bit more. Average price fall since 2015, 23%. So imagine if you were sitting in Aberdeen listening to all the double-digit price growth. I mean, you'd be in tears, wouldn't you? Because your prices have fallen by 23%, 30% for flats, 16% for houses. I'll come on to that a little bit more. We're seeing a substantial difference between the performance of houses versus flats now. So that's something really to take note of, particularly if you're looking to invest in property into the future. So this is correct. This is the way we know worlds work. Economies collapse, prices collapse. Until you have a pandemic. And then everybody went, not going to listen to those 15% price falls. We're just going to go out and spend, and whack values up by 15%, which was weird. So how on earth did that happen? And this comes back to why I think the property market defied everybody's expectations and belief. And the main reason is when an economy falls, two things happen. Everybody's confidence goes. So everybody goes, I'm not moving. Battens down hatches. Demand goes, people don't want to sell, so prices typically fall. And also in the past, when we've gone into a recession, everybody's been mortgaged to the hilt. We have none of that. None of that when we went into this year, slowdown. You walk up and down a road, every other single house is owned. So only less than half the homes that you see are mortgaged. So who cares if it goes up by 4, 5, 6%? Because the majority of people who own a home aren't affected at all. They're not forced to sell like they were in the past. Even when you look at the buyers, people who are going out to buy, they're either half of them, so 1 in 2 buyers that walk through a door, they've either got 30% cash, or the others that make up to 50%, those 1 in 2 buyers, they actually have got loan to values of less than 50%. It's not a surprise. There's quite a lot of us people born in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and we're just all getting older. It's not complicated, it's not rocket science, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. And also, you've got about a fifth of people who are renting now. So when the economy falls, and when weird things happened with mortgage rates, or horrendous things as they did in September, the impact is nothing like it has been in the past. Nothing like. And actually the renters are the ones who are more likely to suffer because, as we saw during the pandemic, they're in catering, they're in jobs that suffer more during the economic circumstances. So tenants have a rougher time these days than homeowners. And this is critical. This is the one thing George Osborne did get right, and everybody had a go at him for, but he got it very right in my view. Since 2014, nobody's bought with an interest-only mortgage. So who remembers is it the 90s? So in 2008, what was the highest valuation you could get? So loan to value on a mortgage could you get? Is anybody?
125.
100. Well, you can't answer that. You're a mortgage man.
Lucky guess.
125. He is right. 125% mortgages. Don't know who came up with that idea. Do know lots of them were with Northern Rock. Bonkers. And that's what we went into the recession with in 2008. People totally spending way too much on property. Well, now everybody's gone in with repayment mortgages. They don't have interest only. They haven't borrowed huge amounts of money, partly because we have banks of mum and dad and people are saving ridiculous deposits. Don't know why, to be honest, to buy properties. And the other thing that we have is normally in a recession, say for example first-time buyers are going to get hit, which you would think they would because mortgages had gone up so much, and you think, well, that's going to, and certainly Savills have forecast that our 350,000 first-time buyers will be 200,000 this year. You think, oh, well, yeah, first-time buyers can't buy, nobody's moving. Populations is changed. So we have older people downsizing and we have younger people upsizing. They don't need first-time buyers, and they've got shed loads of equity because house prices went up quite a lot over the last 3 years. So it's a completely different scenario to what we've ever seen before. And the final thing is the governments have set precedents. If everything goes belly up, we will pay your mortgages or the banks will. And that puts a floor and a confidence into the market that we've never had before. And that's all of those reasons added together, which is why everybody went, well, stuff what's happening in the economy. I can't stand staying in a 2-bedroom house anymore. We're off. And blow me, everybody decided to move that could, particularly houses, which is interesting, and that's why you'll see the difference between the flats. So this is big changes, and I don't think we've really understood how they affect the market, and we certainly don't understand how they will affect the market when we go into the downturn that we have this year. Now this is probably this is where I get really excited. So fancy finding out 2021, all the papers are going out, oh my word, it's horrendous, prices have gone up, these poor first time buyers. Do you know what the first time buyer price inflation was in 2021? You can't answer. Shout out. So bear in mind it was double digits. What do you think they were paying extra? Hello, is there anybody there? Have I know I'm going deaf, but I don't think I'm that deaf because I can't see lips moving.
No, I don't know.
You were just smacking around the head where you keep answering the questions.
Tell us, you know.
So 3%. 3. Why? Because the mortgage rules are really sensible. You can't borrow based on them being 1 or 2%. You have to borrow based on affordability of 6 or 7%. You have to have a repayment mortgage. The lenders can't lend huge amounts of 4.5 times income. They're capped on what they had. And as a result of that, what that's done is that flats, which typically go to first-time buyers, those capped by mortgages, the flat market actually hasn't gone up that much at all. So it's pretty good value on the one hand, but also you won't have seen the capital growth necessarily. If you've got a flat that's grown really well, hold on to it, because most of them haven't, and we are seeing a divergence and we're not necessarily expecting that to change. Whereas houses, lots of cash, lots of equity, people just shoved as much money as they possibly could to compete for those properties that they wanted. So really, really big difference, and that's probably the biggest thing, if you like, one of the biggest things that's come out of the recession is, certainly from an investment point, check the flats, check the houses, really understand what the history of growth has been there, because they will not be equal at all, so really important to do. So much as I could talk to you about the national stuff, I'm utterly useless when it comes to local investment, and that's why you need somebody like Maxine, because I can't get hold of these stats, and these are the stats that you need. So we had a little look and said, right, okay, that's what's happened to prices during the pandemic. What happened to rents? We had a weird thing where actually, unlike everybody's told in the media, you were lovely. We had lovely landlords, and it was very rarely reported how lovely you were. And what you did was you kept rents down because it was a really tough time. And now what's happening is you're being beaten up for putting rents up, which actually is not your fault. It's mostly because the tenants are bidding the prices up because there's so many of them chasing so little property. The result is that March 9, 2019, back to 2020, 21, we saw rents fall, typically, particularly in London, and then they started to increase. Part of that was to make up for the low rates that you'd held them at to help your tenants out, so nobody's going to thank you for that, but thank you that a lot of tenants were helped by their landlords throughout that period. So we've had a little look. Well, if you take it to now versus before, actually rents have gone up pretty much, and they usually dip below inflation. So inflation over that period of time was 13%. So if you had 1 beds or 2 beds, they've gone up pretty much in line with inflation. 3 beds, a little bit more. 4 beds, where there's lots more money and lots less stock, yes, they have gone up slightly more than that. So the good rental increase in houses. But the big thing is, over that period of time, because we've had this weird spike in wages, which nobody predicted, we were all expecting we were all told we'd have a 14% unemployment. Instead, we had a labour shortage and this huge shoot up in wages, which nobody saw coming. Actually, wages during that period of time went up by about 18%. And what this shows me is that actually we know that rents rise in line with wages. They're nothing to do with house prices. They rise in line with wages. So the reason why rents have gone up so much is because they can. It's not evil landlords. You'll be pleased to hear. It's because they can, and people can afford to put the rents up. So what's happening politically? Well, I'm almost speechless, but I can't do that obviously because I'm a presenter. 5 housing ministers in 12 months, for crying out loud. It is utterly ridiculous. I do work a lot more with the government now than I did before. It's not making a blind bit of difference on the rental sector. I don't know what's going on. Deaf ears. Home buying and selling, we're making lots of headway. We have the rent reform bill. We have a levelling up strategy, very exciting 360 odd pages, but it mostly focused on the PRS. We did get some good news. We are trying to drive home buying and selling, so when you make an offer, you have all the information up front. No finding out about silly covenants or all this, that and the other afterwards. We're trying to get you all the information up front, and the government are backing that, which is great. I've finally confirmed the EPC rating. Well, not quite, because I am still asking for a line from government to say it's 2028. That might be a complete spoof, and this is how hard lettings is, because if I can't find out the answer, I don't know who else can, because I work with the government and I work with everybody else. But I put that in because it's come out in so much stuff. I have a feeling this was this weird article from the Telegraph, and don't ask me what they're writing about property, because a lot of it seems to be a ton of nonsense, by the way. Times is much better. Carol Lewis is very good there. But I'm still waiting for that final confirmation. It is about right, it should be 2028, but I haven't got it in writing from the government yet. So I will, if I could scrape that out, I would, but it'll ruin their screen. And then we've lost, the other thing we've lost is Help to Buy. Whether you love it or hate it, it was a fantastic scheme for getting everybody on the ladder. But we were doing 50,000 properties per annum. The new First Home scheme, which is a very good scheme as well. If you've got kids and you can get them on a First Home scheme in this area, go for it. It's fabulous. They get a 30% discount on the property and it stays there in perpetuity. It's a super scheme, but they're only looking at 10,000 of those. We do think we're going to sort out the cladding crisis. However, we have found out there's a bit of a problem with the Building Safety Act, and if you're looking to buy a flat that may be affected by that, check your legal company will do the work and check how much they're going to charge, because the costs could have gone up by 3 times, if not more, and the legal companies are not necessarily doing the work anymore. So it's a bit of a blip. We will sort it out, but just thought I'd make that a bit of a warning. And also we have got some positive leasehold legislation which we're hoping will go through that will make life, it makes life a lot fairer for leaseholders. So it is good news for leaseholders moving forward. But we have an election for next year, so we've probably got till September to focus on housing, and then all will be lost for at least another year, I expect, so nothing will happen. On that point, it is possible somebody else might get in, based on the turmoil that we've had over the last 12 months. I'm not convinced 100% that it will be an easy Labour walk, by the way. People and forecasting is rubbish at the moment, so I'm in my balance. However, they are going to give you a hard time unless they realise this time next year that they've all shot themselves in the foot and that the PRS is a delivery of homes and it doesn't take homes from people, which is what it's been accused of. And of course we have a massive crisis in the social home sector. We're 1 million to 1.5 million homes short, and now we have a massive crisis in the private rented sector because we've run out of homes. Thank you, Mr. Osborne. And yes, you can have that on tape. These are their promises. They want to do loads of social housing. Fabulous, go for it. But don't shoot the horrible discriminating landlords that rent 1 million homes to people on benefits. Don't know where the discrimination idea came from. 1 million homes, that's 25% of the rental sector. Private rental sector goes to people with social homes, or goes to people who probably should have a social homes. And they're going to introduce a renters charter. Well, I'm delighted. I have no idea what else they could put in it, quite frankly, apart from the fact that they can live for free and they can never get evicted. There are almost no rights left that you could give to a tenant, for goodness sake. So much as I'm all in favour of rights for tenants, I actually just wish they would stop properties being allowed to be let illegally, and I wish they would regulate the fabulous agents like Maxine, because Maxine is put at a massive disadvantage, because if you're a rogue agent, you don't pay for training, they don't look after you as much as you get looked after. They don't know all of the laws. They don't look after the tenants as well as they do you, and that is a massive problem for us. So we try and regulate the rental market after the tenants moved in. It's a total and utter waste of time and money, in my view, and we're trying to get them to rent before, stop bad rental markets getting into the market. There's a whole thing on rent controls, very much backed by the Labour Mayor. I love that. I respond to him and go, love to see you looking at rent controls. Perhaps you could work on the 300,000 homes that you owe people because they're eligible for a social home. I'd like to see that plan before you introduce rent controls, maybe, possibly, because that's what they're trying to do. Interestingly, Wales, which is a Labour government, rejected rent controls. Scotland tried to introduce it, got scared, ran away, and now you can up rents by 3% there. But you need to be aware, particularly if you're not increasing rents every year, which you should, particularly with this threat available, that could be put on you at any stage. And certainly if Labour come in, I still wouldn't be surprised if they didn't give it a go. I don't think it'll last, because it's a really rubbish idea, and it doesn't work. But hopefully it won't, but be aware, if you are renting below market value, you could get hit at any time, which is what happened in Scotland. The key issue, of course, is that we haven't got any stock. And the governments have got away with it, successive governments, for a long time, but it's not going to work. And I just got, whether you're into immigration or not, I am into immigration because I just know we haven't got the population to support our ageing population, and I want to be looked after. And so I'm like, yes, bring people in. So you've kind of got a bit of an idea politically what's happened during the pandemic. Hopefully that's useful, and just put it all in a bit of context for you. So what's happening to rents this year? Well, away. That's basically what they're doing, and it's not your fault. I keep telling them, well, these landlords are putting the rents. I said, no, they're not. I have an agent in Edinburgh. They put two two-bedroom properties up for rent, 1,000 applicants for each one. Their CRM systems do not have that capacity. And I sit there with the MPs and go, well, what would you do? Now, you're the agent, you've got 1,000, now what are you going to do? They go, well, that can't be right. And I go, well, it is right, because here's the stats, it's true. And they just don't, we're just not getting through. It's like a brick wall at the moment. But basically, Zoopla, I have to say, are producing some fabulous data. But over and above the 5-year average, rental demand is up by 50%, and the stock of homes for rent is 30% lower than it was. That doesn't mean there's 30% less properties, by the way. It means that when people are looking, the demand is up and the stock that they can find is down. And no surprises, that ends up at the end with a figure of 11%, which is not far off what Maxine's reported here. So rents are definitely up. They can't continue to do that because we know rents track wages, as you saw before. So we're heading towards about the peak that they can be. We're still expecting them to grow at the sort of 2, 3, maybe 4% if you're lucky this year, but that should start disappearing. And what you've seen just now, the 11% is very much for new rents. The ONS figures, which are all very good, you can see, well, congratulations, Mr. Osborne, voila, your policy. And Nicola Sturgeon, off you go, voila, your policy, and rents have gone up. This is all yours, it's all tracked by different countries. Northern Ireland, oh, that's where they had rent controls and they had to drop them. That's gone up the most. So it's amazing. When you leave the rental sector alone, it just tracks wages beautifully. Because we have nice landlords, unlike what everybody tells us. And when you mess with it, governments, that's what happens. We get massive increases. But it is also partly because wages have gone up. So the increase in wages has allowed rents to rise and people to offer more money. I thought it was a great example which Maxine kindly gave me, but this is the real market. So if you're out there and you're a tenant and you see a property come in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you are one of 52 people who responded to get that property the next day. The next day by 9 o'clock. And some face-to-face viewings, 3 applications go in, it's let, and prices have gone up, I imagine, from where they were. And that is the life of a tenant. It is horrible, absolutely horrible. But it works in your favour. It does mean that, you know, for those, you could argue on the one hand buy-to-let investment isn't what it was. No, it might not be. But remember, it's a 20-year game. You don't go into this for the next 5 or 10 years or even and hope to make money. It's a 20-year game, and if you look 20 years ago, you'd all be extraordinarily happy if you invested in property then. What's happening to prices? Well, this is part of my theory, and it goes back to the structure, partly the structure of the changes that are happening. So this is the same as I put up before. So you saw England there, that's the same 310, that's the same 7%, but there's something a little bit different when it comes to the end. So if I take the average house price or property price from February 20 and take that back to 2005, which is my baseline that I use, and then I smooth out and say the average increase each year, before the pandemic it was 3%, bang on inflation. Again, if you're investing in cash, that means it made nothing. from a capital growth perspective, okay? And in fact, you lost money because you'd have had to pay to have bought it, and you paid stamp duty and all of those other horrible things, and tax, etc. When we look at the average house price in 21, when prices started to move upwards, we start seeing a bit of an increase. So it went that every single year you'd have got a 3.3% increase. So that's above inflation. That's more like it. That's what we expect the property market to do typically. And when you look at the market today, it means that if you have a property on the average price today versus 2005, it's 3.8%. So that's 1%. So now you've made money if you're a cash investor. Do you see what I mean? So my conclusion looking at all of this is that we haven't had a boom. What's actually happened is house prices have caught up with where they should be. That's particularly in the case for areas that I live in, like the Midlands, and for other areas that we don't have the wealth that you have here, that you have in London. So our house prices had never moved in line with inflation. They were way below. And if you look at the North East, they're still way below. So it might be 15% increase year on year, but a house today is worth nothing like, is worth a lot less than it was in 2007. Anybody got investments in North East? If you did quite well. How are we feeling?
Not bad.
Glad you got them here as well, I hope. So that to me is my evidence that we haven't had a boom. And when I speak to Zoopla and I've spoken to various others, again, that's why we're not expecting a huge crash this year and never were, because we didn't have a boom and we haven't got huge levels of debt, and most people own their homes anyway. So it's not a big surprise, but it's a very different way of looking at the market. So what are the forecasts? Well, does it really matter? Because they've all been totally wrong. So what I think is important is that you've still got huge amounts of economic growth in this area coming. When I look at other areas, I mean, this would take me weeks, months, years to try and explain to you which road or which property I thought would be good, because there's so much stuff happening. So what I've done is I've put there sort of things that you should be going have a look at. Look at your local plan, look at what's happening in the economy. There are these big wadges of money that are coming out under levelling up. They could make a difference. If a high street's being upgraded, if another area's been, if they're getting a new swimming pool, whatever, that can help. Just push those prices or rents up a little bit more than a street down the road. So when you're comparing property investments, you've got to be quite clinical these days in doing that. They did have a pretty picture which I thought was quite good. So you can work on Huntingdon, and you can work on and round the areas to where to go and start looking for things like that. A14 is finished. Whoa! How many times did I present when we got stuck on that? You are very welcome to these slides, by the way. They are yours, so you can have them. And I love it because my sister's in Brightling, and I'm seeing her on Saturday, and it's beautiful. A beautiful thing. And I understand, Tony, were you telling me that A428 is now up for renewal? Fabulous. My mum used to get, well, sadly lost her during COVID, but she used to get lost down the A48, and I used to get a call. There was a very nice cafe, and I think they just used to know her in the end, and they found a nice lorry driver who'd let them follow her back to the A1. I kid you not. Nice memories. So there is new investment going on. You've got John Lewis developing and building rental homes. That'll be interesting. I'm willing to bet it'll take 3 years before somebody starts slagging off John Lewis as a landlord. At the moment they're being celebrated, it won't last. We're still like, oh, that railway. Oh, come on, just get the railway done. Hopefully that'll come in. And you do have lots of new developments coming in, which is great. They do up an area, they can help increase. I'm thrilled. We've had about 4 developments in my village, and I'm just like laughing my socks off. I'm living in a 200-year-old farmhouse nobody can replace, and they keep shoving up these new builds for twice the price, and my house is just going up and up in value. I'm having a lovely time. But I'm staying where it is. I did realise now that actually everything else has gone up in price as well, so if I tried to trade down it would be horrible. So I'm staying where I am. So what are the forecasts? Okay, Bank of England. The good news is look, we're having a blip. It's going to last a couple of years, but the estimate is long term it'll go down. However, it's not going to go down to sub 1%. But not being funny, since September 21, we did tell everybody for a year everyone should have known that mortgage rates were going to go up. We didn't quite expect them to go up as fast as they did, or as quite as high as they did, but we do expect that things will sort of steady back down. Capital Economics, by far the best forecaster of base rates, by the way. So they think they'll stay at around, they'll peak at around 4.5%. Savills think they'll go down to about 3.5%. Capital Economics 4%, so it'll be somewhere in the 2. But the estimate is by 2025 they'll go back to what will be the long-term norm. So that is really, really good news. And mortgage rates likely to fall and hopefully back to around 3%. But let me know if there's anything different. You're happy with that? You'd be happy with that. You'd be very happy with that, absolutely. So it is a bit of a blip. Do talk to a broker. Please, please don't try and choose a mortgage for yourself. I would never do that. I talk to my broker. I think I know what I'm talking about, but I will not move without a broker, quite frankly. Life is just too complicated not to use an expert at this moment in time, and somebody that you can trust and knows the market. Now, there's loads of stuff on here, just because I've never seen anything so detailed in my entire life, but I have just summarised it. So the expectation is in a few years' time, base rates will have fallen, and pretty much most of the rates that are sitting around 4% should dip down to 3% over the next 3 years. That's basically what that chart says in a summary. So lots of numbers on there, but and the other thing I have found is that the longer you fix for, obviously, then the better the rate is. But then you know, if we do get a bit of if the economy doesn't do well over the next few years, they might drop the base rate a bit quicker. So that's why you have to have that conversation. I know all the numbers, but I won't make the decision myself. I will make it with a broker because you just have to. It's just too complicated to do it. So price forecasts, are we ready? I kind of feel like putting these up and go, well, what does it matter? Because we don't know. We've got them all wrong. Even poor old Savills, who I love to bits and have a fantastic organisation, the only way they get it right is they come out with another set in July for where they're going to end up at the end of the year, and then they're close. But prior to then, it's all utter rubbish. So I've put up some of the regions here, Savills, Hamptons, and James Lang LaSalle. You can have a little look at those. But basically, there's 4 schools of thought, which I think is more interesting. There's people like myself, because of the reasons I've discussed, and people like Zoopla, Richard Donnell is very good there. They're estimating around 5% falls. I'm kind of with them, but I think some properties won't fall at all. And I think some properties will fall by 10%, and some might fall a little bit more than that. So that's why these averages are they're useful to know, but they're not really useful. It's all about a property on a street, and I know we've chatted through that before. 10% falls is the average, so that's what Savills are saying. Knight Frank are saying the same. But again, I think that could be maybe 0 to 10%, something like that. We're still getting people that go, oh, well, it's recessions, falls, and Armageddon, that's coming, da-da-da. Well, it hasn't every time they've predicted it for the last 10 years. At some stage it might happen. I just can't see it. I can't see it in the numbers. The market is too strong. The only reason I thought 10% might be right was because it was quite funny feedback that I had was somebody had said, oh, okay. I said, look, I can't see them falling more than 5%. And they went, you don't know the buyers, do you? And I went, what do you mean? And they went, somebody said that it might fall by 10%. So guess what? They're coming in offering 10% less for properties. And I hadn't factored that behaviour in. And the good news is, what does it matter if they fall by 10%? Who cares? We had a 10% uplift that nobody expected last year. So who loses? And you kind of think, well, all the people that bought last year. Well, did they? Because they tied in mortgage rates at half the price, if not less. So we can afford a 10% fall. We've never been able to do that before. So this shouldn't go any more than that, if that makes sense, because nobody's overgeared unless on the buy-to-let side they have. And I am hearing that there will be some distressed sales from the landlord. So if you fancy picking up some extras, extra deals, that might be the best place for it. For those that are overgeared and are worried about the EPC upgrade rating. Rental forecasts, good news. That over the next few years, they're expected to, normally they'd be about 2%. maybe 3 if you're really lucky. So to get 6, 4%, something like that over the next few years, that is good. It will rely on wages, I think, still rising at that rate. But over time, so as we go, they will fall back. So 25, 26, they're expected. That's their norm, 2 or 3% increase. But you're looking at a 5-year growth on rents that we haven't seen at that level before. This is really, really good rental growth. And it helps with some of the higher house prices that we've seen. So certainly if you're in the market, and you were in the market before pandemic, you're laughing pretty much. If you're going into it now, you've just got to be that little bit more careful about what you invest in, where, and making sure that there's room for growth and room for the rents to grow and room for the capital growth to kick in. What's happening locally? Well, this is nothing to do with me whatsoever, because I haven't got a clue. That's why I come and talk to Maxine. And you're going to have to help me with this, because you put so much information on here, Maxine. There's just like loads of things happening. So
Start.
yes, over to you.
So does that work? Yeah. No. Yeah. Whatever. Very much repeating what Kate was saying. Rent is absolutely driven by the rents that can be affordability. That's what rents are driven by. The finance team are working at the moment on the basis of an 8% increase. That's our mean. Then we'll go into the age of the property, how long the tenant's been there. So although we'll start at 8%, sometimes it goes to 10%, and this is rent increases. We are finding, Carolyn, you can correct me, we said 80% of people are taking any increases without any issue whatsoever. And then we're dealing with the other side of things, just involved at the negotiation. From a point of view of what's going on, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, our landlord's selling. Is everybody selling at the moment? No, they're not. What we're seeing, we've been in business 18 years, so we're now seeing the landlords that really started with us 18 years ago saying, do you know what, I think it's about time I left the market. What I can see, and this is very much my personal opinion, they are being shown huge figures from estate agents as to what they can achieve. And the reason for that is there is a lack of supply for sales. Agents need properties to sell. What we are also finding is that sales are falling through, because where a landlord has said, right, I'm going to sell, I'll either sell with the tenant in place, or you ask my tenant to leave, I want to sell, we're seeing those fall through, 42% falling through at the moment. And it seems to be at the mortgage stage. I think it's when they come to Ben.
Stop passing them to him then.
Right. This is it, this is the value, the mortgage isn't there, therefore the sales are coming through. I tracked these figures for the last year, 23% came back onto the market for rental. They'd lost 8 months worth of rental. So again, from the point of view, if you're running a business, you were expecting this fantastic figure to hit you. And then they most probably didn't speak to someone like Tony, because the capital gains that they would have paid is huge. So, again, you're thinking of selling, do talk to experts with regard to what you need, what you will get out of it at the end of the day. That's the most important thing. 30% less properties advertised year on year. You can look at Rightmove, you can look at Zoopla. Number of reasons for that? Yes, it is down to some landlords leaving. In the main, it's because people are not moving. They can see that if they move, they're going to have an automatic, most probably around about, I'm going to say 18%, 20% increase on the rent that they have to pay. So whereas it would be a case of an easy move going into, I'll go to this property, I'll get another bedroom, it's quite frightening for some people, and it's really, really difficult out there. The household income we track by property data. So again, this is where we start saying, as you working with us as a landlord, what would we suggest your rental increase to be? And I'll repeat what Kate says, you've got to do it every year. The moment you stop, you fall behind the market, and then you're in a situation where you're saying to us, I want it, well, we had one, I want it up by £250. It's not going to happen. You're going to upset your tenant, and the relationship breaks down. But the average household income, that's in the sort of the PE area, is up by 6.4%. And Cambridge household income, and what we're doing when we're referencing for new people moving in, we look at the income that they have. The average household income in Cambridge is 70,000. So if we look at 2.5 times the rent, we can see the rents that can be afforded. And it comes down to employment. We are in a fantastic area. If you go to the Cambridge Bioscience, you can see so many new buildings going up. That is a real draw. There's new life sciences in Campbell, and there is somewhere else that's building, and I haven't got it in my head, so there you go.
Excellent.
That's what's happening.
And it's that local knowledge. I can't do this for every single area. But if you don't have the local understanding for that property on a street, how it's performed to date, how it performed during the pandemic, and how therefore it's likely to perform in the future, and understand this local information, I don't think you can invest sensibly. You'll be investing in keeping your fingers crossed, and that's not a good way of doing it. It really isn't. So I've given you sort of 5 to-dos. You've got to have a business plan now. You really have. Your finances, particularly if you're going to mortgage, are really important, and you should mortgage. I'm looking at buying buy-to-let this year. I haven't been in the market for a long time, but I will be mortgaging because it's very difficult if you're just doing cash investment only to make that pay. So really think about that, talk about that, go and have a chat, at least consider the option. And look at what portfolio will deliver now. Can you finance it better? What is your end game? I love, so many people come up to me and they go, well, Kate, what do you think of this deal? And I go, I have no idea whatsoever. Why are you buying it? And I had one guy walked away, I was in Colchester, and he ran home to tell his wife that she could retire because he was going to make us still work so he could buy more properties, forgetting why he'd bought them in the first place. Lovely moment in my life, I have to say. So have your will and power of attorney ready. I lost my mum in 21. We had a lot ready, but we hadn't updated it enough. Please don't go through the 2 years of paperwork hell that I have been. Get it done now. It's essential. Just please, for your sake of your kids. I've got all mine done. And if you fancy it, Age Concern, I found out, have this lovely thing called a life book. And if I pop my clogs on the way home tomorrow, somebody just picks up a file and can run my life without me. And I sleep better at night because of that. So please get that and get a tax expert. If you are in this room owning property and you do not have a tax expert by your side, you are going to get clobbered. Please don't try and do it yourself. It's too complicated. And I genuinely believe, more so than every year, I think the update now is there's 168 laws. That's well over 400 rules and regulations to let a property. If I see one more person on Facebook say, well, I'm thinking of getting a tenant, they've offered me a year up rent, what do you think? I'm like, you clearly haven't done this before. Please, the fines for getting it wrong are unreal, and you will not be able to get tenants out quite as easily as you have in the past. So if you don't know what you're doing, get a good agent. Please, not for me, I don't get paid on that basis, but I would not personally rent myself. I will have an agent look after it, and I know every single one of those, or I can at least remember them, 168 laws. And the final thing, I semi-retired last year. I did a terrible job of it, and I only managed to do, I think I was doing 3.5 days, but I have worked my socks off for over 35 years, run around like a blue-ass fly, looked after my family, my friends, my parents who were quite ill for 20 years. And one thing you lot are really rubbish at, which I've been up until now and this year, was to enjoy what you do. Just enjoy what you like. I have a lie-in in the mornings. I refuse to work in the mornings, and I go to work in the afternoon. I bought a camper van. Me and my dogs get in my camper van, and despite the fact that they're quite messy and sleep on the bed, I can go and park on my friends' driveways, which is what I do. I don't camp, I'm useless at that. And I go and see my friends whenever I like. We have a meal, I have a drink, they tip me out of the front door into my camper van, get up, make me breakfast, and I'm off home. I am having the time of my life. And if you haven't started that yet, please do it. For the younger ones in the room, you've got quite a lot. You've probably got 40, 50 years to work. Have a break. I think if I looked back now, every 10, 15 hour day I did in my 20s and did in a different life in my 30s and 40s, something I loved, which I'm very lucky to do, I look back now and it's been worth it. It's been worth every hour I spent. I was very lucky to enjoy my work, and I was even more lucky to semi-retire at 55. And I'm only semi-retiring because I love doing what I do. But if I was younger now, because you have a longer time, have a break. Do something different. Plan. You don't have to have one career like we all used to do. You can have 2 or 3. And I think I've had about 4, and I've loved every one of those. But don't forget to enjoy life. Don't get so obsessed with property investment and deals. Close your ears, Matthew and Maxine. But I know they won't mind me saying that. And that's why I love coming here. You won't get a better agent than these guys. And I'm here 10 years we've been working together. I don't do that. I don't do this very much. I do a few presentations a year, but I choose to come here, one, because I've always had a lovely time with yourselves, but these guys know what they're doing. I work with a lot of agents and they're genuinely one of the best. So if you are going to choose an agent, at least go and talk to these guys so that you know how to reference all of the other ones with the half-price deals. Thank you very much. It is lovely to be back here. I hope this was useful, and hopefully look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. I like this one. Ways to mitigate CGT on disposal at an inherited property. Low original cost. Is that right? There we go. That's one for you, Tony.
It is.
And capital gains has changed, hasn't it? The tax has changed, but it's not as bad as everybody thinks, is it?
Yes.
That's the only thing I would say.
We did worry that they were going to change the CGT rates to double just like you. I'm saying.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it won't last long because it's going to pass to the next one.
Okay, so we did worry that they were going to change the CGT rates to be in line with income tax, which have been pretty awful. They didn't do that, but what they have done is taken away some of your annual exemption. So for CGT now, when you sell an asset, you will take the proceeds less the price you paid for it, and that is your gain. There's no inflationary adjustment for that. It's just literally basic maths. Then you had an exemption. That was £12,500. So if you were in a couple, that would give you about £25,000 tax-free of your gain. That has been halved to £6,000 each, and next April will be £3,000 each. So the story is it's only going to get worse. How do I mitigate CGT? Don't sell. That really is as simple as that. It's one of those taxes that we can't avoid. There are different allowances if you've ever lived in the property, so that's something to consider if it's ever been your home or could be your home, but be careful and get advice. But sorry, CGT is very difficult to avoid.
Yeah. But also it's on a gain. Let's not forget that. And the gains here have been pretty good. So it's not as if it's not like the Section 24 where you're kind of paying tax based on turnover as opposed to profit. So it is on profit this time. Oh, I get to do this again. This is great. I love this. If I want to sell my property and I can't use, this is a great one, and I can't, well done, I can't use Section 21, how will I end a tenancy?
Well, I think the first
legally
is why would you want to end a tenancy? You can sell a property with a tenant in place. How we work is very much as an introducer, so that as long as what you're looking for gives the buyer a 5% return on the rent that's being paid, then we can help you move things on. With regard to how you would remove a tenant, the legal way of doing it is a Section 21. That is really the format that you would follow. You could speak to them, you could find them another place, but stick to the law, because you try and be clever, that's when your fingers get burned.
But I think everybody worries about when Section 21 goes, and actually you've got nothing to worry about. You still evict them illegally, but you have to give a reason. Yeah. And we all know in this room, the whole thing is a complete farce. because the reason I evicted somebody on a 21 was because it was a set of flats, and it was her first flat. She got a newborn baby, and it was first time away from home, and she liked weed. And the dealer used to come. And the people that I used to know above and below, they both had kids as well, and I thought this was a nice environment to get somebody off a housing waiting list with a kid, because they'd have really good role models, and they brought in drug dealers. And now what will happen, or when the rules change, they will have to snitch on that person to get them out, although I think the anti-social behaviour will come under that, and then she won't be rehoused by the council. So all that's going to happen is you might take you a little bit longer at worst, but we will now have all the reasons for saying, well, Section 21 was never no fault in the first place, was it? Because we did tell you that, and weirdly, the councils won't rehouse as many people as they are now. That's what I think will happen. So if you're a good landlord, you always have to evict people legally, but actually it just means you have to give a reason, which means that we'll have more explanations that the most people, as they do now, will leave a tenancy because they aren't paying, it's antisocial behaviour, or they've caused a load of damage. That's it. So it won't be any different. For good landlords with good agents, it won't make a blind bit of difference. It's the tenants who will lose out, weirdly.
And I spoke to a number of people before we came in, and a number of people mentioned the Renters Reform Bill. Well, the Renters Reform Bill is being kicked around. It's a lovely soundbite. And they're getting rid of Section 21. But then they tell you, well, what they're going to be replacing it with. All I see is they're just renaming Section 21, because there still will be a means to actually remove your tenant. And as Kate said, it just doesn't work in the tenant's favour, because they're not going to be, at the moment, if someone lives on a Section 21, they are made homeless, so they have to be helped by the council. That won't be the case. So it's just, there will always be a means for you to remove a tenant.
Yeah. I have 250,000 to invest. Is it best to put it in one property outright, or use the money and a mortgage to buy one? Well, you know my thoughts, so I'll hand over to Ben, the mortgage expert.
Buy as many as you can. Clearly you need to understand what your plan is. As you said earlier, Kate, it's understanding what you're trying to achieve. By buying more than one property, it allows you to buy properties in different areas, so you're spreading your risk of types of property, but more importantly, you're going to maximise your capital growth. So if you can have more than one property, if a property goes up by 8%, but if you've got 3 or 4 of them, then clearly your capital growth is going to be much higher. So I think the answer to that question is, don't overexpose yourself, don't borrow too much, but clearly I would definitely look to buy more than one property and not just use all your cash on that one property.
And you will find it difficult to make that to give that a return if it's cash at the moment, when you look at the forecasts and the rent and stuff like that. So as I say, I could do it, but I won't be doing it. Rob, bearing in mind the cost of living crisis that we have now, and tenants struggling, as they will be, is things like legal expenses and rental guarantee, because they went through a bit of a weird period, didn't they, during the eviction,
thank you very much.
during COVID, they rent guarantees disappeared, didn't they, and then they kind of come back.
In order for rent guarantee to work, you actually have to evict a tenant. So basically, because
you couldn't.
Boris basically said, sorry, you can't evict anybody. So basically, the rent guarantee insurance wouldn't actually pay out. However, what they did was they did adapt it and basically negotiated with landlords and tenants. I think you had some. Did you have one that were negotiated? I can't remember.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. So they did help out. They didn't just like say, no, we're not paying out, but they did actually help out. But yeah, now it took about a year for that to actually come back. And basically we use a specialist provider, and it's basically, why wouldn't you? It's legal costs is one of the big things as well, because you have the legal expenses part on there. To evict a tenant or to go to a court, £2,000 in costs, which you have to pay, which the insurance will cover for you. And obviously it covers the rent as well. So yeah, definitely a recommendation.
Max, I'm going to go for this. What's best? Should I buy a 2 or a 3 bed property to invest in?
It depends how much money you want, or you have.
What is the cost? What's a 2 or 3 bed round here? It's not. Mine's cheap. Cheaper where I am.
56 square metres is around about 190 to 200,000. You can now get around about 895. I'll ask one of the lettings team to give me a nod on that on a 2-bed cluster. I'm fuming.
Oh, super nods.
A 3-bed now you could be going up. So a 3-bed, average 3-bed, 76 square metres, garden, garage. They fly out for a start. The one we showed there, the landlord actually wanted to keep the rental down, but we can get, what's the average? I'm going to ask the people that actually do know. On an average 3-bed? 1,000. So it's just basically, as long as we look, when we are looking at properties that you want to buy, the first thing we're going to be doing is looking at the return that you want. Well, actually, that's not the first thing. We're going to get you in touch with a couple of people just to make sure, do you know your exit and things like that. But realistically, what we're looking at is what return you're going to get. That, to me, is the main thing. The cost of the property, in some respects, is secondary. It's what you're going to get out of it long term.
I've always I predicted some years ago 3 beds would be a better purchase, purely because the people with the money would be trading down. So, unless you're in Barnsley. Do you know why you can't buy a 3-bed in Barnsley? Or shouldn't? There's hundreds of them. There's loads of them. Loads of them. They're just like 10 a penny. So it's the one place you wouldn't buy a 3-bed. But I would have thought around here, that my view was that if there were issues with rent, you could then rent each room out. Yeah. If you wanted to. Oh, look at that face. sorry, Maxine. Obviously made a boom there. Yeah, right. And that's why you don't work as an agent, Kate. stick to your slides.
No, I think also what we are finding is you're getting smaller families. So whereas 3 beds, I think most probably 10 years ago, I was saying definitely 3 beds. I mean, they do fly out because there aren't a lot that come onto the market, so that's more of a supply issue. But going forward, we're getting into smaller families. Families are divorcing. People want to actually get into a smaller place. And also then affordability comes into it. Because you can get a nice 2-bed, 895, or you can spend over 1,000 for a 3-bed with a garden. It's just the affordability side of things. So it depends what you want, is the answer to that.
What should people do to mitigate inheritance tax? Because it is unbelievable how much you can inherit, I think, without getting taxed before Labour get in. Potentially. But do you want to walk through the steps?
Not in this seminar. I think we don't have time for that.
A step? Oh, call Tony. There you go.
The answer is the sooner the better when it comes to planning.
Yes.
Clearly, and obviously you mentioned wills and trusts and things like that can also play a part. In short, inheritance taxes for the super wealthy or those who don't plan. So if you are like us in Middle England and you have enough property that you think you have an inheritance tax problem, talk to someone now, get a good will write it in place and just make sure that all those ducks are in a row. It's about getting advice, it's about understanding what you want and your family dynamics. Everyone's different and therefore we can't answer that question in a seminar like this, but we can offer you advice if you want to go and speak to our team at the end.
Yeah, and honestly, it is worth it. It is ridiculous, I think, how much you can save if you do it correctly. What I still don't understand is, because Mum had to go into a home before we lost her, we sold her house middle of November. We didn't lose her, I think, until the end of January, but we were still allowed to claim the relief on the home. So don't tell me that's wrong. Because it's on camera. Just nod. Anyway, it's all been signed off by HMRC. That would be horrendous, wouldn't it? Costly seminar. But I can't I still don't quite understand how that worked, but it was the way. So the reason the rich stay rich is because they do take advice. And one thing I do find with landlords is you never think you're wealthy, you always think somebody else is, but do take that advice, because you can save an awful amount of money. How are we doing on time? Let's have another one for Rob. Oh, I like this one. Can I get a cheaper cover online? Love.
Yeah. Yes, you probably can. But the thing that you have to remember is that when you buy online, it's not an advised sale. So basically, you're clicking a button. You could miss a vital piece of cover that you want. You go to a broker, you get proper advice. They're regulated, and also they will actually look at the market for you. Obviously, you can go online, you can go to comparethemarket.com, etc. But all the different quotes, you'll have to go inside each one and see what the excesses are, etc. As we're a broker, will do that for you. So yes, you can, but do you take the risk on making sure that you've got the right cover?
Yeah, it is true. I've just had. I'm just reviewing so for a business, I get I have business cover. So if I break a leg or something like that, then somebody will pay my wages. However, because I'm now semi-retired, what I hadn't thought about was that I'm not paying myself as much, but I'm paying for cover that they will actually never pay out on because I'm not getting that salary anymore. If that makes sense. So I think it's that kind of thing, isn't it, that you tend to miss. Yes, I get that one. Right, one for probably Max and Tony, and one dear to our hearts. So these EPC stuff. How difficult is it to get your properties up to a C rating?
Well, I am going to totally disagree with what you put up there.
That's fine, because I now know it's not finally confirmed because I can't get the writing.
The EPC, so the Telegraph said last Sunday before, it's definitely going to be 2028. Oh my God. So, what's behind that? Let's just look at the history of it. I think it was the 2020, someone came up and says, right, we're going to have zero emissions. So what we need to do is everybody needs, and this is not just rental properties, this is residential properties. Every house needs to be a C. And then we will get to our zero carbon emissions. So then comes along sort of the changes in EPC, i.e. how you actually measure your house. And it changed, I think it was 2017, 2018. So it went from judging your carbon emission to judging how much it costs. So you can imagine, if you do an EPC now, it's going to be slightly different judgment call. The other thing I'm going to add to it is that I think it's 79% of the properties in the UK are D, EPC D or below. That is going to be a huge thing to do. And this is residential as well. This is where we live, not where we just rent out. So I think the only people, this is where I will come in, that are pushing this date are solar salesmen, solar panel salesmen, air source heat pump salesmen, and double glazing salesmen. They want this. What I would say to you, as landlords, we want to make sure that we've got a safe and warm house for where our tenants are. So go back to the basics, go back to what sort of insulation is there. Go back to the immersion heater. Have you actually got jackets for the immersion heaters? Go back to the basics and make sure that's in place. That's the most important thing. And at the moment, all right, you may kick me, I wouldn't worry about what people say about EPCs. However, if you do make any changes, that's where Tony can help you, because you're going to be spending money.
Yeah, so,
Of course, almost like it was planned.
oh, absolutely. We often work as a double act. So obviously when you spend money on your property, you want some tax relief.
Hey!
Yay, tax relief. You will get tax relief on this expenditure, but when depends on what you're doing, how much money you're spending, and generally speaking, if you are improving the fabric of your property, then that is a capital gains tax relief, not an income tax relief. So don't expect to be able to offset it against your rental income. You will only get the relief when you sell the property, if you sell the property. There are exceptions to that. If you were to buy the jacket for the immersion heater, then that will just go in normal repairs and renewals. And if you are upgrading windows from single to double glazing, that's generally allowed as income tax. But most of the time, things like the cavity walls, repairing roofs, putting new insulation in, they are big capital expenditures, so they will go under the capital gains tax regime. So again, ask the question before you spend the money, and we'll be able to guide you to which side of the tax fence your expenses fall on.
Thank you. I picked up a really good thing on boilers. So you know there's this big argument at the moment about heat pumps and boilers. I was with a retrofit expert, and I kind of looked into this a little bit more, because boilers would come under income, wouldn't they, if you upgraded the boiler? Would they?
It depends.
Would they?
If you're upgrading the technology, so if you're going from a standard boiler to, say, one of these pellet boilers, but that's an improvement, that is part of the capital gains tax.
A pellet boiler?
Yeah, if
wow.
you buy little,
Never heard of them.
Little pellets that go into them rather than
biomass,
oil.
I think, yeah.
Yes. That is an improvement, that is capital gains tax. But if you are just moving your really, really old boiler to a current standard boiler, then that is a replacement, and you'll get that under replacement relief.
And interestingly, what the retrospect guy said was, I'd probably, if it got me to an EPC C rating, I'd go for upgrading the boiler. And part of the reason for that is, you remember we had that bum fight about VHS, which was going to take, I think we're into a similar thing from the guys in this market, for the simple reason that there is a possibility. So when you move to heat pump, that's quite a lot of money even with the funding, but also my understanding is you have to upgrade all the pipe work as well, so there's lots of, it's quite a big thing to do. Whereas obviously upgrading the boiler is easier, but they think that in the future there might be hydrogen boilers, which means you won't necessarily have to do all your pipe work as well. So if you can get up to an EPC rating of C without necessarily making a huge investment, he said as a landlord that is probably what I would do. And I'm looking to do that in my house. So I will upgrade the boiler first. I think mine's about, 2016 didn't seem a long way away, but I've suddenly realised it was quite a long way away now. And that's what I would look. There's a huge amount you can do without actually spending that much money. The big thing I would say though is don't worry about the date. If there's upgrades that you can do, two things happen. What can they pay you more of if the tenant is paying less energy bills?
Rent.
It's the best business decision. I don't get why we kind of worry about the date. Apart from the fact if you get it done now, there'll be people available, whereas if you wait till the deadline, there won't be anybody available at all. They'll be asking my dogs to fix things. And they're rubbish, because obviously they've only got paws. You're welcome. My jokes haven't got any better at all. So the whole point with that is that it's just looking at all the things that you can do. Getting smart meters in. I'm an ambassador for smart meters, who knew? And massive in the rental sector, because the tenant can understand what they're spending their money on, because it might be their appliances. You know, just switching, I switch my TVs off at night, I'm big into this. I've saved over £100 a year just by switching my TVs. I've only got 3, and I know I live on my own, and I've got 2 dogs, but there you go. But switching them off at the plug at night, 100 quid. Who knew? There's all sorts of stuff you could do, and it may well be nothing to do with you why their heating bill is so high. When you get the smart meter, you know I'm obsessed. I go up in the morning and I go check. It should be 35p and 28p for my gas. And I know if I've left something on overnight, because it'll whack up to 40 or 50. Sometimes I come back and I'm a little sleepy, because obviously I don't like waking up early, and I'll think, it's gone up to 54p, and I get very upset and I start running around the house, and then I realise, oh, I know what it was, I put the dishwasher on after 12. But it is smart. I know some people have had loads of issues with them, but I find it great because I know where I'm spending my money, and I've been able to reduce the costs for nothing, effectively. That's how I do it. And I think if you do that for your tenants can help to understand what's making the difference. And there's loads of stuff you can do, draft excluders, all heavier curtains, all sorts of stuff, to really, really lower energy bills by £100 a year. So it's well worth it.